All right, we're going to continue with our drama and ELA integration around the idea of storytelling. So we're going to look at how we can integrate these two curricular subjects around reading stories and telling stories. Here we go. If you haven't figured out, here's my last-ditch effort to impart to you that stories are important. So stories are important. Telling stories is as basic to human beings as eating. More so, in fact. For a while, oh my goodness. For a while, let me just try that all again. Telling stories is as basic to human beings as eating. More so, in fact. For while food makes us live, stories are what makes our lives worth living. To be a person is to have a story to tell. The engineers of the future will be poets. Those who tell the stories rule the world. There is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you, and there's always room for a story that can transport people to another place. Okay. Why are stories so important? Once the necessities for survival are taken care of, we humans spend more of our free time immersed in story than doing anything else. Stories about things that aren't true and people that don't exist for the most part. Think about it. We watch movies and television, play video games, read books, comics, and cartoons, listen to songs, look at artsy performances of plays, dance, and operas, and tell each other stories around the dinner table or campfire. And we've always done this since we have learned to communicate with one another and figured out how to scratch drawings on a cave wall. Stories are such a huge part of our lives that we must be hardwired not only to love them, but to absolutely need them. One of the most meaningful and enjoyable aspects of my life is the time I spend with stories, primarily in novel form, reading about events and people that someone else has simply made up, and I can't really imagine a life worth living without them. Okay. Do children like stories? You should be saying at home, yes, right? Children love to hear stories because that is the way, especially when they are super little, that is the way that they are making sense of the world. Do our older kids love stories? Yes. Do our grade 12s still like to hear stories? Yes. Okay. So what we want to do then is really, really think about how we read stories and how students can potentially read stories. So, narration of a story by the teacher. Again, this is my last-ditch effort to inspire you to be evocative and use active language when you are reading. So, create the story for the students through how you tell it. So, all active language should be used so that students are encouraged and really engage with the story. So remember having to reread your story in 371. I wasn't just me being mean and cruel. Well, maybe a little. But I wanted you to engage with the story because by having different voices for different characters, it helps with students' comprehension. By depicting the meaning of the word with your voice, it helps with vocabulary. By varying pitch and rate of the voice, it helps with fluency. So it's not just fun and entertaining, it's crucial to them learning vital skills around ELA. Okay, so again, if you had to reread in 371, there was a purpose. There was a method to my madness behind there. And this is why, because it's absolutely essential. Okay, so let's look at narration of story now by the students. So when the students are actually narrating a story, we're going to look at story creation. So using one word at a time in bags and boxes. And then we're going to talk about how can they actually just retell a story, like a story that you've read in a storybook, using circle games and masks. So here we go. Story creation. One word at a time. Just gonna make sure I didn't miss anything over here. No, we're good. One word at a time. So this is the good old just one word. So one student will say one word, one student will say another. I can't believe I have an ant in my flower box. Right? That story could have gone so many different ways, but then the students have to be totally engaged. So speaking one word at a time, it enables children to quickly improvise a collective story. So again, low risk, but high applicability. So then they have this story, they can see, they can figure out how to improvise a story. It develops storytelling and listening skills, starting to hear ELA outcomes spin in your brain. Okay, so how do you do it? Basically, students add one word at a time, and when it is their turn, at first you might want to start with a single word, just like I did. Then they might do a sentence at a time. Then they continue to build longer storytelling sessions. They will also figure out when or what derails a story. So if something is just so obscure, or it jumps ahead in the plot too far ahead, it will be an instant feedback that doesn't support a good telling of the story, or ultimately you then can write this down. It doesn't actually contribute to a really coherent story. And they will instantly be able to hear that and see the reaction of what happens when your character does something that's really bizarre, or your plot is jumping all over the place. Okay, and alternatives, you can work in pairs where they can just go back and forth in pairs, or you can toss a ball to the next person, or a stuffy whatever. Just kind of make it fun and light, so that, but all while teaching them good skills in story creation. Okay, I've seen some of my student teachers do this, and it is really, it's really cool, the result. So bags and boxes. So why use it? Again, it offers an imaginative ways to stimulate imagination or thought in action. So how do you do this? So a story bag is basically, you have literally a bag, and you reveal objects from inside the bag as you tell the story. So you could do a demo where you have a sock and a pair of scissors and a perfume bottle. And then you pull these objects out and you tell the story around the object. You can try to link the objects together, or you can just talk about the scissors or the perfume bottle or anything like that. Again, it's really tangible, and it's kind of cool. It's kind of fun to have an actual object that then you're creating a story about. Fill the bag is the opposite. So bag is empty, and children mime putting something in as they follow a storyline or make up a story. So they can actually mime the action. So maybe they mime like, so they're miming, crumbling up a piece of paper and then putting it in the bag. And then the child next to the child who crumpled the paper might say, wow, Joey was really angry because he couldn't write all of his poetry that he wanted to, so he crumpled up the piece of paper and he threw it away. But his dog felt so bad, or his dog picked up the piece of paper and brought it back to him, and Joey was like, okay, I'll try again. And then he tried again. Whatever. And so then it just stimulates some thought for story creation. Magic box is you pass around a magic box. It's whatever box you have, and everyone mimes taking something out that is linked to the story. So I'm gonna go get a book. Hang on. So say you had a story like One by Catherine Otoshi. They may, this is probably not the best one because it doesn't have a lot of different, but they may mime bringing out a little ball. And then the next child would mime bringing out a bigger ball and a bigger ball and a bigger ball in there. And then, of course, that again just solidifies if they're comprehending the story or not. And finally, number 4, story box is where you have a box where items are placed that students feel relate to story or theme of story. Items can be removed as the story progresses. So the students could bring in items. So if you are reading One by Catherine Otoshi, and you want them to bring in things that represent standing up for people, or addressing bullying, those kind of things, then they would bring objects and put them in the story box, and then they can pull them out and add to the story. So again, it's just a creative way to help them to create story. Okay. If you are wanting them to retell a story, so actually I'm going to get a different book. Hang on. So say you're wanting them to retell Owl Moon. I think I read this to you last year in 371. So it's about a little guy who goes out with his dad to call for the owl, and then the owl ends up coming, and that's a super part of this child's experience. So this is when they would actually retell this particular story. So again, you can really see if they're understanding everything about the story. So in a circle or with a partner, again, they could use a talking stick and go back and forth and talk about the story, talk about plot, talk about character, talk about how you would feel if you were that character. Again, that little bit of that role playing. You can also, for retelling a story, you can use wordless picture books, or like Chris Van Allsburg's books, or this is one of his images here. And or you can use your own pictures. They love to see your own pictures that you've brought in. And each person creates a skeleton of a story around the image. So an introduction, a conflict, and a resolution. So Chris Van Allsburg's are really wild and the kids can really get creative. So they could focus on this little guy here, they can focus on this guy, they can focus on the smoke, they can focus on the room, how it's, there's different patterns. So again, they would want to give that skeleton, and you can focus it on character, setting, plot, conflict resolution, anything that you want, or you can do the whole storyline in here. And again, you could have one student can begin the retelling of a book and then have it continued by another. So again, you could simply hold the book up and you could go around the room and you can say, okay, what happened to our character on this page? And then the child retells the story. Again, we'll absolutely show you if that child is comprehending what's going on in the story. Okay. Ooh, a few more circle games here. Okay. I'm just going to make sure I didn't miss anything. No, I'm good. So you can recount a story. So have students fill in the blanks. So you would actually read part of this, you'd read 2 sentences and then you'd say, okay, what's the next sentence? Or what's the next idea? And then again, see if they can comprehend it. Then you would have student retell the story to a partner while in a role. So I'm going back to my Harry Potter. Then the partner tells the story back while in a different role. So you would tell the story to a partner from the view of Harry Potter. So one would be Harry Potter, and then Snape would tell the same story back to Harry Potter, but from Snape's point of view. Okay, again, you're starting to get into those higher level of blooms, thinking about all of these these story characteristics. And finally, each student in a small group reads the same story silently. So each group would have, or if you're reading a novel, maybe they read, a couple pages of the novel. And then when students have finished, you number them off. On a prearranged signal, student 1 of each group begins to retell. So you do this all as a class, but in small groups. Until the signal sounds, then student 2 takes over, then student 3, and so on. You can add in that each number has to be from a various point of view. Okay? So again, just some different ways to bring in these ELA concepts, specifically around story. Okay, now we're going to jump into how you can retell using masks. And this, again, there's something when a child puts a mask on, even a mask like this, where just, their eye, like around their eyes is covered, they will become more liberated and they're really a lot less self-conscious. So if you have some really shy kids in your class, that presentations or doing anything in front of the class either makes them panic or actually brings out anxiety, sometimes just simply putting a mask on the child, not just one child, but the whole class, that child will then, they can kind of hide behind it. And it's something, it's very interesting. They also can, when they have a mask on, they're more willing to connect kinesthetically with the character. So if they're supposed to act like Snape, if they have a mask on, they probably will physically enact Snape's character more than if they didn't have the mask on. So again, if we're talking about those sort of multiple ways of going after information, having a mask on is actually really interesting way to engage those students. You can have, so for masks, you can have them work in groups, and one person narrates the story while the others are masked and they act out the story. Or you could, and then they can work with the character, how the character would move, how the character would talk, how the character would interact with different people. And it's really just kind of a cool, again, way. I have 32 masks in my office. So when it is not COVID time and you decide you would like to do a mask project with your class, come and grab my masks, and so that you don't have to go out. If you really like masks, I would suggest next Halloween, after Halloween, you go and buy masks at half price at Value Village, and then you just keep them and keep them from year to year, and you just use them. It's really pretty cool. So specifically, I want to give you an example of retelling and using masks if you are wanting to introduce Greek mythology. And you're like, yeah, I'm not introducing Greek mythology to my grade 4s. There's actually really great ways to introduce it to them. So these are actual Greek theater masks. So if we were back in ancient Greece and you went to the theater, you would actually see these masks and you would know the character of this person wearing this mask would be very very gregarious and very over the top, and this person is the evil person and never says anything. This one would be the neutral mask, so these would be the choristers who would sort of add in to the show. So again, it's kind of a cool way that they can dive in. So if you were doing something like if you wanted to do Greek mythology, hang on, I just grab my book. Okay, here we go. This, I love Marcia Williams' books on Greek myths for young children. Basically, they are graphic novels, and they, even for me, I was like, oh, that's how all those characters work together, because to just dive into Greek mythology is kind of crazy. But this one actually gives some nice graphic novel style. And what you can do is you can use these masks, because each of these masks could be a different character, and then they do things like tableau, where one person would be Orpheus, the famous poet, and he's playing his lyre, so one would be playing the lyre, and then you could have all the rest of your class could be sitting and listening to Orpheus with their neutral mask on, so that they know that they are neutral characters. Again, just some maverick ideas to get them away from just here's a paragraph, right here, answer the questions. This will really show you if they comprehend, if they can fluently read, if they understand the storyline, all those things that we so desire in ELA. Lots of those can be assessed through using a dramatic element of role-playing and storytelling. Okay, awesome.